Hi there. Welcome back to Haunting Vales. Tonight, we uncover a place where silence has a pulse and walls remember screams that were never heard. It's called the house where no one slept. A mansion standing for nearly a century, untouched, unvisited, and cursed by what happened on a rain-soaked night in 1928. When Hercule Poirot arrived, he didn't just find dust and decay. He found evidence that time itself had tried to bury. Every room whispered a secret. Every shadow seemed to breathe. So, settle in, because this is not just another case. This is the story of the house where sleep was a sin and waking meant death. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Haunting Vales for more tales that haunt your reason and mysteries that refuse to die. Chapter 1. The House That Dreamed Awake. The wind rolled across the moors like a voice that had forgotten how to speak. It carried the smell of rain and the faint cry of something distant. Perhaps an animal, perhaps memory itself. In that lonely countryside stood a house known by the locals as Holloway Grange. For years, it had been left to decay, its windows blank and blind, its chimneys choked with ivy. And yet, last winter, the lights returned. A reclusive businessman named Mr. Leonard Vale had purchased the estate, a man who believed money could polish away any darkness. For months, construction crews worked to restore the mansion. New floors, fresh paint, polished glass. But one thing, as every worker whispered, could not be restored: the silence that lived inside those walls. No one slept the night they first stayed there. Not one. Each of them, separately, reported the same thing: that just as their eyes began to close, they heard footsteps walking through the corridor. Slow, measured, and always stopping right outside their doors. And then breathing. When Poirot arrived, he did not come as a guest. He came as an observer, invited by an old acquaintance, Inspector Harold Finch, who confessed that Holloway Grange was quickly becoming a matter of local fear. A maid had gone missing. A butler had quit without notice. And the master of the house himself claimed he was being watched. The case was strange even by Poirot's standards. But the strangest part came from Vale's own words. "Monsieur Poirot, no one has slept in this house since it was rebuilt. Not even me." Poirot had tilted his head. "Then perhaps, my friend, the house dreams for you." Vale had smiled faintly. "I just want to know if I've rebuilt something I should have left buried." When Poirot arrived that evening, the storm was just beginning. The sky hung low, swollen and gray, and the road to Holloway Grange twisted like a thought that wanted to be forgotten. The iron gates groaned as the car approached. The mansion loomed, its many windows flickering with amber light, the reflection of fire from the drawing room. It looked less like a home and more like a body trying to remember it once had life. Inspector Finch met him at the door, tall, weathered, his uniform darkened by rain. "Evening, Poirot," he said. "I'd asked how the trip was, but I doubt anyone could enjoy this weather." Poirot smiled politely. "The weather, my friend, is merely the world expressing its confusion." Finch led him inside. The air was heavy with polish and smoke. The faint scent of damp stone lingered underneath, something old that refused to leave. The house was grand, but in a way that made you whisper. Portraits lined the hall, all faces of a family long extinct. Their eyes followed everything. In the main hall, a fire burned, tall and alive. Beside it stood Leonard Vale, lean, pale, his suit too perfect, his hair combed back as though he feared a single strand might betray him. "Poirot," he said softly, "thank you for coming." Poirot nodded. "You spoke of sleepless nights. Tell me, is it fear that keeps you awake, or something else?" Vale looked at the fire for a long time. "Fear is easy to name," he murmured. "This is something harder." He turned toward the staircase, motioning Poirot to follow. "I'll show you." They climbed to the second floor, where the halls grew narrow and colder. The air felt still, as though the house itself was holding its breath. Vale stopped outside a closed door. "This is the east bedroom," he said. "It's where my maid, Clara, vanished 2 weeks ago. No broken lock, no footprints, no open window. She simply wasn't there in the morning." Poirot stepped inside. The room was neat, too neat. Bed untouched, mirror spotless, curtains tied back precisely. But what caught Poirot's eye was the clock on the mantelpiece. Its hands were frozen at 3:12. He bent closer. "The time? Is this when she disappeared?" Vale nodded. "I believe so. Each of us heard something around that hour. A noise, a whisper maybe. And then silence." Poirot frowned. "And yet you kept the house open?" "I wanted to prove it was imagination," Vale replied. "But the imagination can kill, can't it?" Poirot glanced around the room once more. His eyes paused on a framed photo on the desk. An older couple standing before the house years ago. "Your parents?" Poirot asked. Vale's expression changed. "No, the previous owners, the Holloway family. They died here. A fire. Only the daughter survived. She sold the ruins, left the country. No one's heard from her since." Poirot placed the photograph back carefully. "Perhaps," he said softly, "this house remembers her." That night, Poirot remained awake in the guest room overlooking the gardens. The rain had eased, but the wind had not. Its low hum seemed to circle the house, brushing against the windows like the hand of something unseen. At precisely 3 o'clock, Poirot heard it. A footstep. 1, 2, 3. Slow, measured, deliberate. It stopped right outside his door. Poirot waited, heart steady, mind sharp. And then, the faint creak of wood. The door handle moved, just slightly, enough to show intent. Then stillness. He rose, silent as the air itself, and opened the door in one swift motion. The hallway was empty. But there on the floor lay a trail, faint marks of water, leading down the corridor toward the east bedroom. Poirot followed. Each step echoed, as if the house itself repeated his movement, mocking his precision. The door to the east bedroom was open now. Inside, the light flickered weakly from the fireplace. And then Poirot saw it. On the mirror, a message written in the mist of condensation. Still awake, Poirot stood motionless, studying the letters. They dripped slowly, as if freshly written. Yet there was no one there. No Briss, no movement. Only that sound again, slow, steady breathing from somewhere behind him. He turned. No one. The window was shut tight. The curtains motionless. And yet the clock on the mantelpiece ticked once, a single click, and stopped again at 3:12. Poirot exhaled. "So," he whispered, "you keep time only for the dead." Morning came gray and exhausted. Inspector Finch found Poirot already in the library, sipping tea, his eyes bright with thought. "You saw something?" Finch asked. Poirot nodded. "I saw intention. Something wants to be remembered. Something, or someone, trapped between waking and sleep." Finch sighed. "You think the missing maid's still here?" "I think," Poirot said slowly, "she may not be the first." He pointed toward a row of blueprints spread across the table, the plans for the reconstruction of Holloway Grange. Several rooms had been altered. One hallway, however, was missing entirely from the modern design. "Finch," he said, "have you ever asked why no one sleeps here?" Finch frowned. "Because it's cursed?" Poirot smiled thinly. "No, because the house itself is not finished. There's a space that exists, but should not. And that space dreams instead of the people inside it." Later that day, Poirot requested to see the basement, the one place Vale avoided. The stairs led down into cold stone darkness. The walls were damp, and the air smelled of dust and mold. Halfway down, the inspector's flashlight flickered over something carved into the wall. Faint letters, half erased. "Clara," Finch muttered. "The maid's name." No, Poirot said, his voice low. Older. Look closer. The letters continued below. Holloway. Vale's face went pale. That's the daughter's name. The one who sold the ruins. Poirot turned him slowly. And perhaps, he said, she never truly left. They reached the bottom, where the ground was uneven. A section of wall looked newer, the bricks a different shade. Poirot pressed his hand against them. Hollow space, he murmured. A wall built to forget. He stepped back. Mr. Vale, how long since this section was rebuilt? During renovation, Vale said. The workers said it wasn't on the plans, so they sealed it. Just a gap, they said. Poirot looked to Finch. Find me a hammer. Finch hesitated. You think? I think, Poirot interrupted softly. We are not alone in this house. With a few heavy blows, the bricks began to give way, dust spilling into the air. Behind them, a narrow passage appeared, dark, close, lined with stone. The air that came out was cold, not the cold of weather, but of memory. Poirot took a lantern and stepped inside. The passage twisted left, then right, ending in a small chamber. And there, on the ground, lay a bed, perfectly made, untouched. Above it, on the wall, a single word was scratched in faded paint. Sleep. Poirot stared at it for a long moment. Then he turned to Vale. Mr. Vale, he said quietly, I believe your house does not allow sleep, because it is already dreaming of the ones who never woke. That night, no one dared close their eyes. And yet, somewhere deep within the house, a door creaked softly open. Something, or someone, was awake. Chapter 2. The Night That Wouldn't End. Rain returned with the evening, not in thunderous sheets, but in slow, rhythmic waves that tapped against the glass like the ticking of a great unseen clock. It was the kind of rain that made time stretch and rooms shrink. Holloway Grange seemed to breathe with the weather, each gust of wind stirring the curtains, each rumble of thunder echoing through its ribs of stone. Poirot stood in the main corridor, eyes fixed on the spot where they had uncovered the secret passage. Workers had sealed it again for safety, yet the air that leaked from its cracks still carried that peculiar scent, something cold, like rust and forgotten water. Inspector Finch approached, coat collar turned up, notebook in hand. Housekeeper says she heard voices again last night, he muttered. 2 of them, a man and a woman. Poirot turned slowly. And she was alone when she heard them? She swears it, Finch said. She said they came from the east bedroom. But when she went to look, nothing. Poirot nodded, his mind already moving through invisible corridors of thought. The voices, my friend, may not belong to the living, but they do belong to someone. He walked down the hall, his polished shoes whispering against the floorboards. The east bedroom door stood ajar, its hinges creaking softly like an old throat clearing itself. The fire inside had burned low, leaving only coals that glowed like wounded eyes. Poirot studied the room. The message on the mirror, still awake, had vanished overnight, wiped clean by morning air. But something else caught his attention now, the clock on the mantelpiece. It had moved, no longer frozen at 3:12. Now it stood at 3:13. Only 1 minute forward, but enough to turn the air heavy. Someone is tampering, Poirot murmured. Not with objects, but with time itself. Finch frowned. You think someone's been inside? Not quite. I think, Poirot said, touching the clock gently. The house itself remembers movement. Each action leaves a scar. This 1 minute is a memory that refuses to fade. He turned to Vale, who had entered silently behind them. The man looked worse, pale, sleepless, his eyes hollow. I heard her again, Vale whispered. Last night. Clara. She said my name. Poirot studied him carefully. And what did she say precisely? Vale hesitated, his voice trembling. She said, Why did you build it back? They moved to the study, where the rain drummed louder against the windows. Poirot spread the blueprints of Holloway Grange once again, tracing the lines with delicate precision. "Look here," he said. "This corridor, it leads nowhere. Yet in the old plans, it connected to something called the East Wing Annex." Finch leaned closer. "But that part was destroyed in the fire." "Yes," Poirot said softly, "but not completely erased. There remains a space, perhaps between the walls, where the structure remembers the shape of what once was." Vale swallowed hard. "Are you saying the house is alive?" Poirot's voice was calm. "Alive? No, but built with emotion. And emotion, my friend, is the most dangerous architect of all." He paused. "Tell me again, Mr. Vale, why did you buy this house?" Vale turned toward the fire, his reflection wavering in the flames. "My father was born here," he said. "He left after the fire. Never spoke of it again. When I found the estate for sale, I thought restoring it might redeem something like repairing a broken name." Poirot nodded slowly. "Restoration, yes. But you see, when one rebuilds a graveyard, the ghosts must also be reburied." Finch shifted uncomfortably. "And if they weren't?" Poirot looked at him. "Then they wait. And perhaps they speak." That night, the storm deepened. Wind lashed against the house as though it wanted entry. The walls groaned with each gust. The lamps flickered, and somewhere deep within, a door slammed, though no one moved. Poirot stayed awake again. Sleep, he decided, was a trap, a way for the house to reach him unguarded. At exactly 3:12, a sound broke the silence. Not footsteps this time. A piano. Soft, distant, a tune that belonged to another century. He followed the sound down the hall, through the main stairway, and into the drawing room below. The air grew colder with each step. The fire had died, leaving shadows that quivered like dark thoughts. There, in the corner of the room, stood the grand piano, untouched for years. Its lid was open, the keys gleaming faintly in the light of the storm. And yet they moved, not by hands, by memory. A melody played itself, note by trembling note. Poirot approached slowly, his breath visible in the air. He watched as the final note hung, trembling in the silence, and then stopped. The clock on the mantel struck 3:13 again, and the sound vanished. He stood there a long moment, then turned sharply toward the doorway, where a figure stood in the dark. Inspector Finch. His face was pale, his eyes wide. "You heard it too," he whispered. Poirot nodded. "The house repeats what it remembers." Finch swallowed. "And what does it remember?" Poirot's gaze lifted toward the ceiling. Someone who wanted to be heard. Someone who was silenced. By morning, the storm had broken. The house looked almost peaceful in the gray light, its edges softened by mist. Yet peace, Poirot knew, was an illusion, the calm that follows when something terrible decides to wait. He called everyone to the dining room. Leonard Vale, Inspector Finch, the housekeeper, Mrs. Grady, and the two remaining servants. "My friends," Poirot began, "a mystery is not a ghost. It is simply a question wearing a disguise. Let us begin to undress it, shall we?" He gestured toward the servants. "You have lived here since the reconstruction. Tell me, what was done with the rubble from the old house?" Mrs. Grady spoke nervously. "Most of it was cleared away, sir. But some of the stone, the workers reused it. So it was part of the charm." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "So the new house is built with the bones of the old." He looked at Vale. "You did not rebuild, my friend. You resurrected." Vale's face drained of color. "What does that mean?" "It means," Poirot said, his voice low, "that everything the house once knew, every cry, every death, every breath, was built into its walls again. You gave memory a body, and now it dreams." Later, Poirot wandered back to the library alone. The air there was still, untouched by wind. He looked up at the portraits lining the wall, the Holloway family. The father stern, the mother gentle, the daughter standing slightly apart, her eyes sad even in paint. He leaned closer, studying her face. A faint signature in the corner caught his eye. Not the painter's name, but something else. A word scratched into the varnish, as though done in haste. Awake. Poirot felt a shiver rise beneath his skin. The door behind him opened softly. Leonard Vale again. His voice was weak. "I can't stay here another night," he said. "Something's wrong with me." I close my eyes and I see her. That girl from the painting. Poirot turned. "You have seen her where?" "In the mirror," Vale whispered. "She stand behind me. But when I turn, she's gone. Every time." Poirot moved closer, calm but intent. "And what does she do, this figure in your mirror?" Vale's voice broke. She mouths the same word. "Sleep. But I can't. None of us can." By the third night, exhaustion had begun to unravel everyone. Faces grew hollow, eyes red. The entire house pulsed with unrest, as if each brick had learned to breathe. Poirot spent the evening tracing the blueprints once again, searching for patterns. Every corridor, every alignment, every door. And then he saw it. The layout of the upper floor, when viewed from above, formed the shape of a clock face. The bedrooms sat where the numbers would be. And the east bedroom, the one where Clara vanished, was placed exactly where the number 3 would rest. 3:12. 3:13. The house wasn't haunted. It was timed. Poirot rose from his desk, pulse quickening. "Mon," he caught himself. "My word, the design itself is the trap." He hurried to find Finch, his shoes echoing against the floor. "Inspector, I have found it. The reason for the sleeplessness." Finch blinked. "What?" Poirot pointed toward the stairs. "The house functions like a clock that has never stopped striking the same hour. It repeats its final moment again and again. The hour of the fire, the hour of death." Finch frowned. "And how do you stop that?" Poirot's gaze hardened. "By finding what keeps it alive." At 3:12, the east bedroom door opened once more. This time, Poirot and Finch stood waiting. The light flickered, the clock ticked, and the mirror began to mist. A faint handprint appeared upon its surface. Then another. Then the words, slow, trembling, appeared again. "Still awake." Poirot stepped forward. "You are not unseen," he said quietly, "but you are unheard. Tell me, who silenced you?" The fire guttered. A whisper moved through the air, soft and sharp. "He did." Poirot froze. "Who?" The mirror darkened further, until a faint image took shape, a woman's face. Pale, eyes closed, lips unmoving. And then, for the first time, the voice came not from the room, but from within the walls. "Find my grave." The clock struck 3:13, and the reflection vanished. Poirot exhaled slowly. "So," he whispered, "the night will not end until we find where it truly began." By dawn, the decision was made. The next step would take them beneath the house once again, deeper than before, into the earth that still remembered fire. Poirot looked up at the house one last time before descending. Its windows, wet with rain, glistened like eyes. Watching, waiting. The house had not slept in decades. And now, neither would they. Chapter 3. The Dream That Killed the Living. The storm had passed, but the air around Holloway Grange still felt like it was holding its breath. The house stood silent beneath a colorless sky, its windows black as if mourning something only it could remember. Poirot walked the corridor with slow, measured steps. Every sound seemed amplified. The soft creak of wood, the hush of distant wind, the faint beating of his own heart. He had spent the day reviewing every detail, every whisper, every pattern. And now, as dusk fell again, he knew the answer was waiting underground. Inspector Finch and Leonard Vale followed close behind, carrying lanterns that swayed with each step. The light cast trembling shapes on the walls, shadows that moved too freely to be trusted. They reached the cellar stairs. Poirot's voice broke the stillness. "Gentlemen," he said quietly. Tonight, we find the truth. And once we do, the house will finally rest. One way or another. They descended. The passage smelled of damp soil and time. The deeper they went, the colder it grew, as though the house were warning them to turn back. Yet Poirot pressed on, his lantern steady, his mind sharper than the cold could dull. When they reached the chamber they had found before, the one with the single bed and the word sleep scratched into the wall, Poirot stopped. Something had changed. The bed was no longer empty. A shape lay there, covered in a thin layer of dust, the outline faint but unmistakable. Vale's breath caught in his throat. My God, what is that? Poirot raised his lantern. The light fell upon the figure. It was not flesh, but cloth, a dress. Torn, burned, half buried beneath old stone and ash. Finch knelt and brushed the dirt aside. Beneath the fabric, the glint of something small appeared, a gold locket. Poirot took it gently. Inside was a photograph. A young woman, the same face from the portrait upstairs. The Holloway daughter. And opposite her image, etched inside the locket, was a single word. Remember. Poirot closed it carefully, his voice low. She was here, all along, entombed beneath her own home. Finch looked sick. You mean she died in the fire? Poirot shook his head slowly. No, she was sealed here after the fire. Vale stumbled back, pale and trembling. No, that's impossible. Who would do such a thing? Poirot turned to him, his gaze like glass. Tell me, Mr. Vale, your father, he lived here once, did he not? Yes, Vale said, his voice cracking. But he left after the fire. Left, Poirot repeated. Or fled. Vale looked up sharply. Poirot stepped closer, his tone calm but cutting. When you rebuilt this house, you said you wished to redeem your family's name. Redemption is a curious motive, Mr. Vale. It usually hides guilt beneath its shadow. Vale's lips parted. What are you implying? Poirot lifted the locket. That your father was not the victim of this house, but its creator. Finch stared. You think his father did this? Poirot nodded. The Holloway daughter, she was your father's secret. The affair, the scandal, the jealousy that burned this place to ash. When the fire ended, she did not die in the flames. She was hidden here, by him, to keep the scandal silent. He built over her grave, brick by brick, wall by wall, until the truth itself had no air left to breathe. Vale's knees buckled. He covered his mouth, his voice trembling. I didn't know. Poirot looked at him with quiet sorrow. But the house knew. It remembered the lie that built it. And that memory, that unfinished story, has kept it awake ever since. He turned toward the word sleep on the wall. This was not her command. It was her plea. Suddenly, a tremor moved through the floor. Faint at first, then stronger. The walls began to groan, dust falling like pale snow. The lanterns flickered violently. Finch shouted, What's happening? Poirot's voice cut through the panic. The house is collapsing, not from weight, but from release. It was never haunted, Inspector. It was remembering. They ran back toward the stairs as stone cracked behind them. The passage filled with sound, not a scream, but a sigh. A long, deep exhale from something finally allowed to rest. When they reached the main hall, the ground shook once more, then fell still. The house had gone quiet, truly quiet. No footsteps, no breathing, only silence, the kind of silence that felt like peace. Poirot stood by the fireplace, breathing heavily, his face shadowed by the flicker of dying flame. Finch leaned against the wall, pale and shaking. Leonard Vale stared into nothing. So it's over? Poirot nodded. Yes, she sleeps now. The dream is complete. He placed the locket on the mantelpiece, above the fire. The photograph inside caught the light one last time before the flames dimmed. Poirot's voice softened. There are houses built of wood and stone, and then there are houses built of regret. One crumbles slowly. The other, not at all. Morning came cold and pale. The sun touched the cracked windows, painting the ruins in weak gold. The workers returned to find Poirot standing outside, coat buttoned, hat in hand. Inspector Finch approached him. "Place is finished," he said quietly. "Half the east side's collapsed. Vale's leaving the country." Poirot nodded. "It is better that he does. The living must move away from the dreams of the dead." Finch looked back toward the shattered house. "Do you believe in hauntings, Poirot?" Poirot smiled faintly. "Only the ones inside our conscience." They stood together for a moment, watching the house fade behind the mist. Then Poirot turned, his eyes calm, his voice certain. "Come, Inspector. There is always another mystery waiting to wake." That night, Holloway Grange slept for the first time in half a century. But in the ashes of the east wing, beneath what remained of the old foundation, something glimmered faintly in the dark. The cracked glass of the mantel clock. Its hands were frozen once again. At 3:12. If you were drawn into the mystery of the house where no one slept, then don't let this silence fade. Stay with us for more untold cases of Hercule Poirot. Each darker, each more haunting than the last. Like, subscribe, and let the next mystery find you. Because somewhere out there, another house is waiting. Awake.